Mutated creatures are becoming a growing concern. Animals with human DNA, genetically modified glowing pets, and lab salmon made to grow twice as fast as natural ones. What are the ethical concerns of tampering with DNA? What are the dangers that GMOs can have on natural ecosystems? These are highly controversial hybrids, genetically modified or mutated creatures. Human-animal hybrid chimeras. That does not sound like a real thing, but it is. Human-animal hybrid chimeras are creatures that combine human and animal cells, resulting in organisms with both human and non-human characteristics. Imagine a being with the body of a pig, but with human brain cells. Crazy, but it does have its upsides when it comes to stem cell research and organ transplantation. But obviously there's some ethical things to consider, and there have been legal restrictions on this kind of research. In the United States, the Human-Animal Chimera Prohibition Act of 2016 was introduced to address some of these concerns. On August 22nd, 2016, Representative Christopher H. Smith put forth a bill that prohibits creating a human-animal chimera, transferring human embryos into non-human wombs, or vice versa. Penalties could be pretty severe, hefty fines and/or imprisonment for up to 10 years. But the bill didn't end up getting passed. Humanzees. These are hypothetical hybrids of humans and chimpanzees. There are rumors and conspiracies about attempts being made to create them, but none have been 100% verified. Doesn't sound all that outlandish to me though. Obviously this type of experiment would be highly unethical, so it would make sense that there would be attempts to cover it up. The first and most infamous attempt to create a human-chimpanzee hybrid was spearheaded by a Soviet biologist, Ilya Ivanov. Ivanov had set out to create a human-chimpanzee hybrid as early as 1910. By the 20s, he was trying to artificially inseminate female chimpanzees to create part human, part chimp offspring. It didn't work, but his next plan was even more ambitious. He wanted to impregnate human women instead, but that's when the government supposedly stepped in and put a halt to his work. Then in the 70s, there was a chimpanzee named Oliver who became a bit famous when rumors started to spread that he might be part human. He had some unusual physical traits, an odd cranial shape, and he had freckles, but a genetic analysis in 1996 revealed that Oliver had the standard 48 chromosomes of a chimpanzee, not the 47 you'd find in a hybrid. So Oliver was just an unusually unique chimp. But stories about human-chimp hybrids don't end there. In 1981, a story came out about a chimpanzee being impregnated by a human in 1967 in China. A man named Ji Yongzheng, the head of the hospital in Shenyang, said that he'd been part of this experiment. According to him, the chimp was successfully impregnated but died from neglect when the Cultural Revolution disrupted the research, and scientists involved were sent away to farm labor. In 2019, there were also reports of a research team led by Professor Juan Carlos Espelza Belmont from the Salk Institute for Biological Studies in California having success with creating human-monkey chimeras. These embryos, which were only allowed to develop for a few weeks, were reportedly created in China to sidestep legal restrictions in the States. They weren't allowed to develop past the early stages in order to avoid more ethical issues. Let's talk about ligers. A liger is a hybrid cross between a male lion and a female tiger. Unlike chimeras, ligers aren't the result of genetic splicing or more complicated science experiments. Instead, this is just straightforward breeding. With that said though, there's still a ton of controversy with this. Ligers are often larger than either parent species thanks to a phenomenon called hybrid vigor. This means they can grow to be enormous, often reaching sizes beyond even the largest lions or tigers, and they can be very strong. But the major issues with ligers is their health. They usually have a whole list of physical problems, like joint issues, organ problems, and a lot of this has to do with their rapid growth and the fact that obviously they're not really supposed to exist. Plus, these things only exist in captivity. Ligers are bred for spectacle. Breeding ligers is legal in many places, but it's heavily scrutinized and of course illegal in others. Glowfish were the first genetically modified pets. They're a zebrafish that glow in the dark. Glowfish were developed in 1999 by scientists who inserted a gene from a jellyfish into a zebrafish. This gene causes the fish to produce a fluorescent protein, making them glow under ultraviolet light. Now, originally these fish were created to help detect environmental pollutants. If the water was contaminated, the fish would change color. But the glowing fish just looked so cool that companies started seeing dollar signs. Legally, glowfish are somewhat of a gray area. They were first marketed in Singapore, where the regulations on GMOs were more lenient. When they were introduced to the United States in 2003, there was a lot of controversy. Some thought they were neat, little nifty novelties. Others had concerns about the ethics of creating genetically modified pets and the impacts they could have on nature if they were to escape into the wild. Glowfish are legal and available to buy in a lot of places, but they're banned or restricted in others. For example, California has specific regulations when it comes to the sale and transport of genetically modified organisms, and glowfish were banned there for a long time. I think they may be legal now though. If anyone's from California in the audience, please let me know. Przewalski's horses are a rare species, one of the last truly wild horse breeds left on Earth. Native to the steppes of Central Asia, these horses were on the verge of extinction, but there have been a few attempts made to get their population back to a healthy place. In 1998, an experiment took place in the wake of the most disastrous nuclear accident in history, the Chernobyl exclusion zone. The vast area around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant had been evacuated due to radiation and was then transformed into a sort of nature reserve with only a small handful of humans inhabiting the area. It seemed like the perfect place to release 31 of these endangered horses. Today, these horses have not only survived, but thrived. By 2019, their population in the Chernobyl zone had grown to over 100. And are there some possible negative consequences thanks to radiation? Possibly, but probably better than human tampering. Obviously, considering how rare these horses are and the conservation efforts being made, people aren't allowed to mess with these horses. Unfortunately though, poaching has been an issue and it's taken a bit of a toll on their numbers. Alright, next up is genetically modified salmon, produced by a company called Aqua Bounty Technologies. Now, this one is different from others on the list because there aren't restrictions on them, but there really should be, and I'll explain why. So these are the first genetically modified salmon approved by the FDA for commercial production and consumption. Aqua Bounty Technologies took genes from two other fish, Pacific Chinook salmon and the ocean pout, and inserted them into the Atlantic salmon's DNA. But why? Well, the goal was to create salmon that grow about twice as fast as regular salmon do. Instead of just growing seasonally like natural salmon, these guys grow all year round. So they're available on your plate all the time. Very convenient, but not everyone is on board with this. One big worry is what might happen if these GM salmon were to escape into the wild. Even though the FDA insists that this is not a concern because the salmon are raised in controlled environments and are sterile females that can't even produce anyway, a lot of people just don't want to eat genetically modified food. Well, alright, big deal, just don't buy them then. Well, that's the issue. The Aqua Advantage salmon doesn't have to be labeled as genetically modified because according to the FDA, there are no biological differences between it and the non-GMO salmon. So if you're trying to avoid GMO foods, you might not even know you're eating one. In 2015, a team of scientists from South Korea and China successfully created what they called double-muscled pigs by editing a single gene, the myostatin gene, or the MSTN, which naturally regulates muscle growth. By turning off this gene, they created these very jacked pigs. The goal is to have these pigs approved for human consumption, but that didn't end up happening. The idea is pretty straightforward. In theory, modify the genes to create meatier pigs and other animals like cows and goats. Sounds like a dream for the meat industry, but in practice things get a lot messier. When CRISPR is used to edit the genes, it's often done by first altering individual cells from the animal's skin, then using cloning techniques to turn these cells into embryos. The cloning process can create a lot of problems. For example, in China, out of 900 genetically engineered pig embryos, only 8 survived with the desired genetic changes. Many of the piglets that did survive were born with severe health problems, like thickened tongues, and many didn't make it past their first few months. GMO mosquitoes. These little critters are designed to help fight diseases like malaria, but like with everything on this list, there is some controversy here as well. One of the big selling points of GMO mosquitoes is their potential to reduce populations of disease-carrying mosquitoes over time. The idea is to release genetically modified male mosquitoes that are designed to outcompete wild males for mates. The offspring of these matings won't survive to adulthood, gradually lowering the mosquito population that carries diseases. Field tests have shown that these GMO mosquitoes don't appear to have any major impact on humans. They're engineered to target specific mosquito species, which means the risks to other species or humans seems minimal. Another advantage is that introducing GMO mosquitoes doesn't involve pesticides. This is a big one for those concerned about harmful chemicals being released into the environment. Now, on the flip side, these modified insects could carry or even develop unknown pathogens that might be harmful to humans. There's also criticism that not enough long-term testing has been done to understand their full impact. There's also a fear that these GMO mosquitoes might mutate into a form that could reproduce, which could create a new set of problems. This last one is quite dubious. The flying umbuku lizard. So the story goes that scientists in Zimbabwe managed to unlock a dormant genetic trait in the umbuku lizard, a small, rare reptile supposedly native to Africa. The lizard is believed to be a descendant of the pterodactyl, the prehistoric flying reptile. So these scientists were able to reawaken a flying strand of DNA that had lain dormant for millions of years. And the result, they created the flying umbuku lizard. To date, apparently, only 6 of these flying lizards have been produced, and they're kept completely separate from the regular umbuku lizards, just to make sure there's no crossbreeding between the genetically modified lizards and the non-modified ones. I can't find a lot of info on this one. I'm not so sure I buy it. But what do you all think? Let us know down in the comments. And with that said, I've been your host, James. I'll catch you, yes you specifically, in the next video.